One. Welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone, joined by a full bench. I got Chris Snee. Hello, Chris.
Good morning again.
Yeah, this definitely isn't the second time we're trying to record this. I've got Zach Blostein, who is sleepy and maybe grumpy.
Good morning.
You said you weren't grumpy on the first take we did,
Well, now it's the second take.
and now you're grumpy. And we got the legend himself, Dirty Dane Draper, Houdini, Dane Train. I think there were some other new nicknames that people on the board have added, but regardless, I can't remember them right now. Dane, welcome.
Yo, thank you. Hello.
All right, let's get going. We have a lot to get to today. This is going to end with us talking about a recent road trip we did together, and that'll probably devolve into sophomore humor. But we will try to be very professional, buttoned up to start off this podcast. Very FSU news centric show today. Let's get into it, Chris. Softball is kicking butt, taking names. It's been a fun season regardless. We don't talk about them a ton on this show, but they deserve some shine, some love right now for what they're doing. It's continually a great product. Kat Sandercock had a perfect game last week in the regionals, led FSU to the super regionals this weekend, and already off to a really good start so far. Looks like they're one game away from the College World Series.
Yeah, they beat Georgia 8-1 last evening at the complex. It was a packed out house. I think they announced just over 2,000 in attendance, but if you include the garage and the people over the left field wall and the firemen that were also there in center field, it was probably around 2,800 if I had to guess. It was a very, very good crowd. That team's phenomenal. I think the best things I can say about that team, and we've covered them all year, me and Brett Nevitt have led the charge there and made sure we were there consistently at games, keeping up with them when they were on the road, things of that sort. And we have plans to try to continue to cover them to the last pitch of their season this year. The best thing I can say about that team is very well tested. Lonnie put together a very, very difficult schedule. They played a ton of ranked teams. A majority of those games came on the road. They went to Oklahoma. They went to Oklahoma City. They were not scared of playing anybody and everybody. And I think it has very much prepared them for where they are currently right now. The other thing about that team, extremely talented. Kat Sandercock leads that pitching staff, but they have a multitude of girls that have thrown 40 or more innings on that roster that they trust, they believe in. McKenna Reed's one of the best freshmen in the country, sub-1 ERA for her on the year. I'm interested in how game 2 this evening at 8 p.m. on ESPN will be handled from a pitching perspective, just because Lonnie has created so many options that it's not a definitive, if it's not Kat, which I don't expect to be Kat starting this evening, who is it? It could be Mac Leonard. It could be Reed. It could be Allison Royalty. It could be Allie DeVoe, who we saw last evening coming in relief. So there are options, and she uses them. But she uses them in a variety of ways. She's approached pitching very differently than I've ever seen a softball coach approach it, but it's become kind of a moving topic this year among the softball community about the idea of relievers and changing it up and going from someone who throws off-speed, slow stuff to somebody that can zoom it by you, things of that sort. Offensively, talented ball club, can do a lot. Michaela Adamfield's well known for her power and her ability, but Kaylee Harding, Mac Leonard, Janai Kerr all have been very good doubles machines for them. Katie Dack was very hot early in the year with hitting home runs. Muffley gets on base. Mudge moves people around, also hits a lot of doubles herself. Devin Flaherty gets on base and creates havoc. FSU will put you on a cement mixer machine. That's the exact way I think the Georgia coach described it last evening. Tony Baldwin, when they get people on base, they're just going to move them around on you, get you real uncomfortable. Everybody refers to it as creating havoc, and they certainly do that. Their ability to go first to third and second to home on simple hits is very, very impressive. They create runs in a sport where if you got somebody on base with one or no outs and you got them at second base, you're probably going to score a run. And they do an excellent job of turning that around. They have a real shot. They're a really, really good ball club. Everybody thinks Oklahoma's kind of unbeatable. I'm not in that boat. They're extremely good, and they are the favorites to win the national title for a reason. But FSU has built all year with the intention of getting to a 3-game series in Oklahoma City with Oklahoma, who's on the other side of the bracket, and proving that they belong there and they can do it and they can pull off another national title. But Kocha, as Lonnie goes by, phenomenal job by her. Her staff does a phenomenal job. It's been last season, not to be ESPN and bring up the Mississippi State losses like they love to do so much, but last year taught that team a lot of lessons, and there were a lot of returning pieces. And the way they approached this year, throughout the year, with the way they scheduled, the way they played, the way they approached their pitching, the way they handle adversity, all of it is spurred off of the lessons learned from last year ending in a fashion where they did not expect it to, nor enjoy the way nobody enjoys their season ending, but they were shocked to a degree that their season ended when it did last year. And it's why they're now in a position one game away from going to Oklahoma City.
Chris, you mentioned the atmosphere
Yeah,
early,
it's
early on
awesome.
there. It's great. So, like, if we can like paint a picture, you don't have to do rankings, but I'm curious, like, when softball is at its pinnacle for a series like this one, like, where does it rank in the best like FSU of other sports, the best FSU environments when they're also like at their A game? Like, Doak, like on a Saturday night's number one, but like, what else
So
would be there?
last night, fifth inning, they're one run away from ending that game prematurely. I think Janai Kerr was at the plate, if I recall correctly. That place was ready to pop. And it was loud. It was consistently loud all night. Crowd was way into it. The young lady spoke about it afterwards about how Uncle Mo is there for them, and it definitely exists. But man, if Kerr put one in play or put it out of there, that place was going to lose its mind. And it's just, my wife's a huge softball fan. It's turned me into a pretty big softball fan over the years. I've enjoyed going. I like the people I deal with in that complex, and I have for years. Um, it's been really cool to watch it go from being very popular to like insanely popular. They could have put 1,000 more seats there last night, and they
Mhm.
would have sold in a matter of minutes. I mean, that place is ready to be. Alabama, I think, seats about 3,500 at its max. FSU's about half of that. They had 2,000 last night. I think FSU could easily get to 3K in that stadium right now and sell it with ease in postseason play. And for the Floridas and the Clemsons and the VTs, there's a lot of it too. And it's been kind of a talking point. Tony Baldwin talked about it, the head coach for Georgia. Obviously, the SEC and the Pac-12 are very much considered the great softball conferences, and then the Big is pretty good too. Or I'm sorry, Big 12 is pretty good too because of OU, who's obviously going to be leaving it, and Oklahoma City and some others of that sort. But the ACC's playing a good job of catch up, and FSU's led that charge. Clemson, relatively new program, become pretty good. VTech, good program. Duke, also fairly new, very good. Best season I think they've ever had is the current one that they're in right now. They've just elevated the conference, and I think fans' interest is elevated. The average person that goes to softball will tell you the two things they like is one, it goes pretty fast, and some of that slowed down this year because of review and UCF pitcher things that happened last weekend where she took about 40 seconds between pitches. Hello, pitch clock. But it is faster, and the other thing is it's enjoyable. Some sports, I feel like there's a sense of dread to them, like you're waiting for the shoe to drop, something bad to happen. I feel like softball's the opposite. You're always kind of expecting you're one hit away from probably putting yourself back in a position to play a good game. Even Georgia last night before the fifth, that was still very much a game. FSU just made sure to create the space. But no, the atmosphere is really good in comparison to other atmospheres at FSU. I mean, some of the best atmospheres I've ever been in are obviously in Doak Campbell, and everybody knows that. There's 80,000 people there. They understand that. FSU basketball versus Louisville a few years ago is as nuts as I've ever seen the Tuck. Women's basketball, when they've had really, really good teams come in here and gotten good crowds, 3-4K for like a Notre Dame or a UConn or somebody of that sort, those are good crowds. But like softball, they're way into it. And there's a lot of diehard faithfuls to the softball fan base here. And, good player family element to it too. So I think all of that helps create the atmosphere even when it isn't really crowded. And last night was an excellent crowd, and Georgia had a good contingent. So there was always a little playing off of one another. But no, it's definitely, in my opinion, it is the sport at FSU that is most fast growing in fan interest and anticipation of their events.
It is such a cool environment because you have the people over the garage and people in the outfield. It is extremely unique. And softball's obviously been really good for a while now. It's a remarkable product and keeps getting better. Speaking of remarkable products that keep getting better, shout out to Chattanooga Whiskey, the sponsor of our podcast. They do an amazing job with bourbons and ryes and all kinds of different funky finishes that are super unique, and they do an amazing job. It's a great product, one that I'm extremely happy to have supporting us here at On the Bench. If you're in the state of Florida, they're in 14 states now. If you're in Florida, you can find it pretty much anywhere. I would highly recommend their 111 cask strength whiskey. Excuse me, easy for me to say. If you want a bourbon with a little more oomph to it, but that doesn't drink like crazy hot and still has got a nice level of richness, sweetness, and complexity. It's one of the best values out there on the bourbon market. Chris needs fallen in love with it. Hopefully not too much in love, like not a Jeremiah Byers level of love, Chris. But
No restraining order there.
that's probably for the best. Okay, let's move it on. to some news that happened earlier this week, and that was the ACC on the heels of the spring meetings last week announced a revenue sharing system that'll start in 2024-2025 season. It'll be based on performance. Basically, if you make the playoffs, you'll get more money. Chris, it was a very vague email that was sent out. Other than announcing it, there weren't specifics on what that money would look like. I've been led to believe around $10 million payout if you make the playoffs. Keep in mind, the playoffs will expand, I believe, in that year to 12 teams. So higher chance of like 2 teams in the ACC making it. So basically, it's based on solely on-field performance, not TV revenue or TV footprint, broadcast, anything like that. So let's get going on this, Chris. Get your thoughts on it. Someone on the Unconquered board referred to it as a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. I thought that was probably pretty apt, but I don't want to taint the jury pool here. What were your thoughts when you heard that was indeed coming to fruition or supposed to in a year from now?
I mean, I think it's a good description. I thought the release was hilarious. This is a line from it. The specifics of the plan are in progress and will be solidified in the coming months. So we're not actually going to tell you a whole hell of a lot here, kids. That's what they're saying. The other thing is that they call it success incentives. I love that political term for, hey, you're actually good here. You deserve more money. And it's for revenue generating postseason competition, which is a non-specific term in itself. Obviously, first thing you think of is football. College football playoff expansion is a big part of this. NCAA basketball tournament's probably the next one up. Beyond that, I'm not really sure how we're going to, point to something as revenue generating versus non-revenue generating. And college athletics, where they love to act like they're broke when they have hundreds of millions of dollars. No, I mean, it's minor. It's better than nothing. $1 is better than $0, but it doesn't close a gap of 30 or 40 million, which is a gap that's going to exist. Now, if 2 teams from the league make the playoffs, FSU, Clemson, for example, it's really good for them and it will help them, but it doesn't, again, close the gap. And the other thing that release comes out is it hammers down and shuts the case off of they don't really intend to do anything else, excuse me, to change revenues. Another line from said release, all other revenues will continue to be equally shared as currently outlined. So the whole thing about, hey, we're the people that move the TV needle, FSU, Clemson, especially being the people that do that versus the vast majority of the rest of the conference. Well, good for you. We're still going to split that pie, which is the biggest pie currently available to the ACC. So no, it doesn't fix it. If schools can find a way out that have a landing spot, they will find a way out. The issue is finding a way out.
Yeah, this doesn't change a ton. It's not a sustainable model. It's not going to keep everyone happy. It's not going to keep the powers of the ACC satisfied. I mean, it's better than nothing, like Chris said. But no, there have been other leagues that have done an uneven revenue split before. I think most notably is like I guess Big 12 did it about up until recently, until Oklahoma and Texas, but it's been going for a little while. And you saw some schools like Nebraska and Texas A&M leave 2 conferences that do equal revenue sharing. Oklahoma and Texas had their own side broadcast deals, like to earn extra revenue, and they still left anyways. Ultimately, like the amount of money that is available in the Big Ten and the SEC for broadcast rights is so substantially more than what can be offered elsewhere. That's what's currently being offered elsewhere. It really is kind of a moot point. Like it doesn't matter as I view it. So this is not quite akin to arranging deck chairs on the Titanic, because you can improve your outlook a little bit for Florida State. Like if you can get $10 million by making the playoffs, like it's kind of weird that they didn't have that to begin with, but it only does so much. So the fan response was not fantastic. They weren't really happy with it. Florida State fans, understandably why. Chris, one talking point I did want to touch on with you, because I've been listening to like some national podcasts and trying to familiarize myself with the business part of TV networks and contracts. But like one thing that has come up fairly frequently from national talking heads is this kind of scoffing at Florida State, thinking that it deserves more money than Boston College or Wake Forest because of the on-field product has not been great the last 5 to 7 years. I disagree with that. I think that's short-sighted and silly and is not talking about what's actually driving revenue and interest. But I defer to you to get your point on this.
Not to hurt the feelings of any Dallas Cowboy fans that listen to this, but the reason Dallas Cowboys are popular is because people watch them. A lot of people watch them. Whether they're really good or they're crappy, people are going to watch them. FSU, when they're really good, a lot of people watch them, and when they've been crappy recently, people are still watching them. Like, that supersedes everything. If we're talking about money, and in this conversation, money is media partners, which is largely TV revenue. If you're driving people to TV sets, which still matters, even though cord cutting has become prolific, it still matters, and it creates the revenue. The ACC TV deal is built on the backs of Florida State and Clemson, plain and simple. And Michael Alford and Graham Neff at Clemson have made no bones about that. They've been very direct about that. Michael Alford put the numbers out there directly for you. I think, end of February is when he did that?
Yeah.
So, like, if you want to scoff at it, have at it, but it makes you look like a dumbass. I mean, that's the plain and simple truth of it. Like, the TV money is there because of those schools. Has FSU sucked at times in recent years? Yes. Did we make the playoffs? No. Hell, did we make the postseason a couple of those years? No. But people still watch them. They are still the ones that drive the TV traffic. Go look up the ACC championship numbers when FSU are, well, you can't because FSU and Clemson have consistently been in it. But look up when the opponent is a lesser team and how it influences it, the checkout on that. So one thing the league got right in recent years was getting rid of divisions so FSU and Clemson can play in a championship game.
Mm-hmm.
You know why? Because the TV numbers would be really, really good for FSU versus Clemson instead of Clemson versus Wake Forest or FSU versus Duke. It's just a matter of fact. They drive TV people. They have large fan bases gathered around major metropolis areas, especially in the Southeast. For example, for FSU, it's Miami, Tampa, Orlando, Atlanta. For Clemson, there's a lot of them in Atlanta, obviously. That's going to drive TV numbers in big markets. That matters. It's going to drive general TV numbers of national interest. At the end of the day, that's what matters. The reason, and I believe it was Ross Dillinger that said it, that Oregon and Washington didn't immediately end up in the big when Kevin Warren was investigating the idea of doing that was media partners said the money wasn't there. Part of that, and Oregon and Washington are good brands in their own right, but Washington doesn't have a national reach. They're very popular to their fan base, but that's it. Mm-hmm. Oregon's national reach is a little bit better than Washington's because of uniforms and just general fan interest. Oregon's one of those programs that some reason generates it. FSU and Clemson both are far superior to that. They would drive media partner money if they became available on the market for other leagues to land them. So I think that's a stupid notion on their parts. I think it's short-sighted. This whole thing's being driven financially by media partners and TV revenue. Mm-hmm. They want properties within their leagues that make their leagues more valuable from a TV viewership standpoint. FSU and Clemson are two of those. Oklahoma and USC are two of those. UCLA, but it's in Los Angeles, massive TV market, so it makes sense. Plus, I'm sure UCLA wanted a dancing partner with them out west. So, there's a reason who has moved to where they've moved, have moved there because of TV.
And the fact that FSU has still performed well, broadcast numbers, television viewer numbers, despite not really being relevant other than the last year or so, in the last half decade or so, like, that only undercuts the point for national people. Like, the fact that this thing is ready to explode if it gets on the right track, and we think it is, like, that's undercutting what your point is. It's like, yeah, there's a level of hubris for Florida State to say, hey, they're not in a great position to make demands as much as they could be if they had it together the last post-Jimbo era.
But
like,
who else did in the league? Who else carried this league in the time FSU was down? Clemson, right? They're the dancing partner with FSU. Who else was there? Like, I don't care about the other teams in the league. They can have their feelings hurt. They've not filled the coffers with money. They've been lifted by what FSU and Clemson has done for them over the last 30 years. Sorry that FSU and Clemson came calling for more money when the market suddenly changed. That's how this thing works.
Yeah. And they've, like, Florida State has invested in football. Clemson has invested in football. There's others that have, but there's others that have not invested anywhere near what other programs have. And that's the one thing I do like about it being incentivized is, like, it will continue to fuel Florida State to keep reinvesting in football. Not that they weren't doing that already, but it further hammers that home. And I think from a long-term perspective, your end game is to get out of this conference. I know what Michael Alford said, that's the preference, and that would be ideal if everything was together at the ACC meetings. But I think the long game is because of the cap, the ceiling that the ACC has presented so far without a real plan to really earn more money. and what the TV revenue is currently. Like your end game is to get into the Big Ten or the SEC. That's what you're working towards. So it does fit nice and tidily in that like there's incentive for you to be better at football right now, right? Because
And
you're going to continue to invest in it, and then that will prepare you, in theory, if things go well, to be competitive when it matters, if or when you move up to another conference.
and since FSU hired their current AD, the mission statement of this program has been football.
Yep, exactly. So I think we're seeing what the long play is. I think Michael Alford has more or less done what he can do with a pretty crappy hand, and now we kind of see like what the world around Florida State looks like in the next few years. And that's
Hey, Zach,
right.
how excited are you by these last 20 minutes?
He
I'm
yawned
excited
once.
for you guys.
That's good. Zach
hates
stand up real quick.
conference realignment. It just doesn't do it for me.
I think all of this is like nothing's really going to happen until they make the decision to leave. And I think I like that people are interested in it because it shows that the college football world does care. And it's one of those topics that does carry weight nationally. But man, like, I mean, we're talking about like you get a few extra bucks. I shouldn't say a few extra bucks, but for these programs and these, these institutions, a few extra bucks for making the playoffs. Like this should have been a thing that was instituted like in 2014, but we're in 2023. Yeah. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, success incentives should have always existed. It's a simple thing. If you earn it, you should keep it.
Yeah. I mean, not to speak too
and
much.
Let's be honest, FSU wouldn't get diddly for the basketball tournament last year because they were miserable at basketball. So, like, it is who and what you are. It's not like this changes and FSU suddenly is just going to make more money. This changes and says, well, if we're good at it, we're going to make more money. So I'll let you know a little secret. Probably investing in basketball the next time they have to hire a coach will be a little bit more of a incentive-based idea because there might be a return on that incentive. Crazy concept.
We're all incentive-based employees, and it makes you work harder, and that's the truth of the matter. And
the best.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Brent. The best thing FSU's done, and Alfred led charge, obviously, in the last, 8 months or so, they've muddied the waters, and they've made it a very public debate. And they've proven that Clemson is, in fact, a dancing partner with them, and that there are others, maybe not truly 5, that can get out of conference simultaneously, but there are others that are interested in the idea and ready to do the idea. It makes it very uncomfortable, and I don't know how much it accomplishes short term, but I think it's better than acting like we're all dancing in a circle around the campfire and we like each other, personally.
Zach, stand up real quick so we can make Owens happy. They're wearing garnet. All right, Zach, real quick as we go to the next topic here, can I get a he's here, idiots?
He's here, idiots.
Keon Coleman is arriving in Tallahassee this evening, so I guess he's technically not here yet. But if you're listening,
wow, so you made me lie. That means nothing.
Keon Coleman, the Michigan State wide receiver transfer, is arriving in Tallahassee on Friday evening. I expect him to enroll. I hate putting timelines on things, but probably next week is when it'll happen. He's got a class schedule, good to go, so that'll happen. Just always weird with transfer recruiting because a guy can commit and then you have to wait for it's like this big rush, hurry up, get it done, and then all of a sudden you have to wait for a little bit. And we've seen like FSU tried recruiting Antavius Lane, who was committed to UNC back in January, but couldn't enroll then. And so like you can still go ahead and recruit someone. So that was good that it's going to get done, that he's going to be here as early as possible. Not just that you eliminate any chance of Ole Miss still trying to make a run at him, but for him to get here and start developing chemistry with Jordan Travis and the rest of the offense, that's nice. I believe the other class of 2023 prospects are arriving as well in the next few days here. Got Conrad Hussey, Blake Nicholson, Keith Sampson, Edwin Joseph, Sam Singleton, Goldie Lawrence, Jabril Rawls, Andre Otto, and Dylan Brown Turner. This is going to be a Buyer Sonone question for you fellas, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
The Turner Group. You can reach out to Colin Turner at 407-403-8546. Email him at getstarted@theturnergroup.com. Or you can just go to Google, type it in, the Turner Group, and you get an idea of what he does from a sales perspective, buying and selling homes in the state of Florida, specifically Central Florida, but they are moving up to Tallahassee market. They actually helped a couple of Florida State players find homes, and he's doing a really good job of figuring out a market inefficiency. Basically, it's a lot cheaper month to month to own in Tallahassee than it is to rent, and there's a pretty big discrepancy. Whereas rent in Tallahassee, Zach can probably attest to this, is pretty high for college students, but owning, as Chris and I can attest to, isn't. And so if you're a parent of a Florida State student and your son, daughter is about to get to Florida State or going to come in the next few months here, consider the possibility of making it a profitable adventure, owning, then renting out later, instead of just flushing money away. So you can reach out to Colin Turner, and they have the infrastructure to help you out with that now. Probably a really good idea for you guys if you have that flexibility. So, buyer Sonone, guys, which freshman enrollee will make the biggest impact this season? Zach, I'm going to start with you.
Bye. How is that a buy or Sonone?
That was the joke.
Okay, good. Well,
Nice.
bye.
Okay.
Conrad Hussey for me.
How come?
I think they absolutely need safety depth, and we've seen in years past under Mike Norvell and Adam Fuller that they love rotating defensive backs, even if it's a guy like Pack, who is a walk-on. Like, they will rotate guys to make sure that everyone's staying healthy in games, and I think Conrad Hussey is from a program that does a great job at preparing student athletes to get to the next level, and he's been working on his craft, and he'll be ready to go as we enter fall camp.
Dane, how about you?
I think Zach has the best answer. That's what I would go with too, but I'll put another name out there because he took the best one. Edwin Joseph, I think.
Sorry.
Edwin Joseph, I think, is a good option for that. I think he could. I mean, we were talking about this on our road trip that we'll get to, but that he could be like maybe the best nickel on the roster by the end of the season or something potentially. Like, he's a really good prospect, and he kind of comes in with a more college ready body than most guys. He's kind of a thicker build, and physically he's almost like I know he's really long. He's really long arms. He doesn't lack physical traits and ability that some other guys might have. Like a Kevin Knowles maybe, who's much shorter, I guess, or not shorter, but not as long. Yeah. Or Greedy Vance even. We love Greedy Vance, but those guys don't have the same frame that like an Edwin Joseph would have.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be interesting to see him come in, see what kind of impact he could have early on.
Chris?
I mean, I think Hussey's the answer, but does Ashwin Barker count? Because technically he'll be a freshman because he has 2 years eligibility left.
You know what, Chris? Yes, I'll let him count.
Yeah, I still think the answer is Hussey, but Barker's a guy that I think can get in that mix for very much the same reasons as Edwin and Conrad.
Because he will be a redshirt freshman, so I guess he counts as the freshman class. No love for Blake Nicholson here.
I thought you were going to say Blake Nicholson.
But I feel like this season, if we're talking about next year, I think Blake Nicholson's like the number one guy.
Mm-hmm.
But
the top 3 at linebacker is so defined, and then I feel like they've forced, and that's not a knock on them, but force-fed Omar Graham into that 4th spot, and they want that to be what it is this year. So at best, that would make Blake 5th or 6th along with DeMarco.
I guess so. I think maybe I'm maybe most intrigued to see Blake Nicholson just because he's coming from a smaller classification in California, but I think athletic profile-wise, like, he could end up being the most impactful guy coming in for this summer. But I think we have a better idea of what Conrad Hussey or Edwin Joseph will be because of the level of competition they faced in South Florida. So, and also like a need for playing time at those 2 positions, specifically safety. So I think if we all had to this is for us to diversify in the answers, I think we'd all agree with Zach that Conrad Hussey has probably the clearest path to making an instant impact as a true freshman. But I think they have about 3 or 4 guys who have a chance to contribute some way or another, either special teams or something coming in here. Let's see. Oh, Zach, let's talk about Teja Young. Am I saying it correctly? Is it Teja, TJ? Do we know?
I honestly don't know.
I think it's TJ.
Really?
I think.
I don't believe you, Dane.
Probably not going to speculate.
All right. Yeah, probably not. FAU cornerback, safety, kind of a do-everything defender. Entered the transfer portal the other day. He is a redshirt senior, so he's a graduate transfer entering the portal. Super productive during his career. I think 160 tackles, 7 interceptions. 4 of those have gone for touchdowns, multiple forced fumbles. Good this last year, had like a 66.5 PFF grade. The year before, when he was more of a safety than a slot defender, he had an 87.5, somewhere in that range, PFF grade, which is exceptional, like on 800 snaps. So someone who is very productive at the Conference USA level. Zach, you've had some good scoop on him the last few days. Someone that we know FSU, if you listen to this podcast, is in the safety market. Buyer Sonone, sponsored by the Turner Group. FSU pursues Teja Young, TJ.
Well, I'm going to avoid that question. I think, thank you, the Turner Group. Sorry, Colin. But yeah, I think FSU's been in contact here. It's, I wouldn't describe it as they're pursuing him quite yet, but he did have conversations with Adam Fuller, defensive coordinator Adam Fuller, and head coach Mike Norvell on Thursday. He had a conversation Thursday afternoon or evening with Norvell. I don't know if anything was set up or like as far as visits go, but when I checked in the early afternoon, he did not have any visits set. I was told Ole Miss, LSU, and Mississippi State are 3 other schools that had reached out besides FSU. I was told FSU is the only in-state school that had reached out at that point. But yeah, I mean, we know Florida State's desperately in need of a safety, and they're one of the schools that's most heavily in the market for a transfer safety. So pursuit wouldn't be surprising to me, but I guess we'll see kind of how things shake out. I'm not going to answer that.
Okay, so it's because you're compromised on this, and we have a bet that whether he's going to take a visit or not.
Cannot confirm or deny that.
All right, Zach loses a lot in these bets, so it's probably a good thing if you want to see Teja Young on campus if you're in Team Sonone on that. Chris, you're smiling. Anything to add in here?
I watched an FAU video package a moment ago to make sure it was Teja Young, which is how they said it in the FAU video.
Oh, take your victory lap, Dane.
Let's go.
Teja Young.
I mean, we've spoken a lot about safety. Me and Zach chatted about it on the last OTB. They need a safety net guy, for lack of a better term. I know there's a pun to that, but
Chris loves that
they
too.
do. They need that guy that can be reliable, has played a lot of college snaps, can do a variety of things, can allow them to move either that player or another player like a Shaheem Brown around to do different things on different downs and different situations. So at some point, yes, they're going to have to say yes to somebody to be their bride at safety, and the options just aren't very deep.
We'll see if he ends up making a trip here to Tallahassee. Seems like he's very much so on the radar. There's an evaluation process going on. You want to make sure someone's a good fit, that they'd be able to contribute right away, especially with a 1-year type of deal. Make sure he's comfortable with the role. So there's a vetting process going on here. To add to what Zach reported earlier, he said there was nothing set up as of yesterday afternoon. I can confirm as of yesterday evening, still nothing set up visit-wise yet. So Zach, you're still in the clear right now. For now,
I feel bad like talking about a bet where I'm betting that someone's not going to visit, but
it's not for money. It's just for us bragging rights. Just for me to tell you that I'm right and you're wrong, and that just happens a lot.
Not as often as you think.
Earlier this week, 24/7 Sports updated its top 247. FSU had 4 commitments inside of those rankings. Leading off was Landon Thomas. Not a big surprise there. He had a 98 grade and remained ranked at 24th nationally, still a 5-star guy. FSU flipped him from Georgia back in April, which, by the way, Georgia just got another tight end commitment, so they have 2 in this class. I think that's probably a good sign for Florida State that Georgia, I mean, I'm sure they would take Landon Thomas, but it seems like they are building a backup plan, which is probably a good thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I mean, they took the number 1 tight end or number 2 tight end, whatever. There's like rankings discrepancy on that, but Landon Thomas is number 1 in our rankings,
and number 1 in our hearts.
Jaden Riddell is some other really high end tight end as well that they just landed.
Nice to be Georgia, huh? Yeah, we lose 1 5-star. We should take another.
I think the day after Landon Thomas committed, they got a crystal ball for that kid. It was like their tight end recruiting is elite. I mean, Todd Hartley, he did it, I think, at Miami as well. He did a really good job, and then he's been obviously amazing at Georgia with Brock Bowers and all those guys behind him. Darnell Washington.
Next up, Luke Kromenhoek, quarterback, who's been pledged to FSU for it's about 2 years now. Has it been 1 year? We saw him in person 2 years.
Like a year and a
2 years
half.
ago. Okay, year and a half. We saw him in person about 2 years
Committed
ago.
in spring of 2022.
Okay, thank you. His grade gets a bump from 93 to 94, moves up the rankings slightly, going from 66 nationally to 63rd. We'll get to the Cam Davis drop in a bit, but he goes from a 93 grade to 92, and that decrease, in addition to other guys going up in the rankings, drops him from 86 nationally to 116th. And then athlete Lewayne McCoy from South Florida goes from 172 to 158. So FSU has 4 commits already in that top 247. But Zach, I think the big takeaway here was surprisingly, you got cranky after doing a really good VIP update on all the inside information on where FSU stood for other top 247 prospects. You got cranky because it took a really long time to do it because FSU's in it for a lot of guys. And
how did I get cranky?
He was being cranky. Chris, come on. He was being a little, it took forever. I'm groovy.
I don't think he was being cranky. I think he was being studious and doing a phenomenal job. Very good job, Zach. I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I do have to say, I just want to love on Zach since Brendan's hating on him. Zach's kicked ass and taken names in recruiting recently.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like I don't know who he's trying to compete with. I guess it's himself, but like it's been awesome to watch. I mean, the amount of information he's dropped on the site recently, and obviously June's going to be a pivotal month. That was for you, Brendan. But he's been all over the fact that they're setting up for a very pivotal month.
Thank you, Chris. Would you say I'm checking all the boxes, though?
You are, buddy. I've tried to move on from that one, but you are.
I'm not letting you move on. Thank you.
We've had over 100 subscribers in May for Knowles 24/7, which is weird because we haven't had any like big promos or anything recently. So, but we appreciate everyone for giving us a chance. Gear up now, like get ready for June because it is going to be a crazy month of recruiting coverage with Zach and Chris leading the way. Dane's going to be helping out a ton. I'll probably be making some appearances as well to go and muck things up and make it awkward as well.
In between your 9 vacations.
I feel less rested after the vacations. Anyways, Knowles247.com is where to go. Back on track, guys. That wasn't me who deviated this, by the way. For the 5 people who are like,
we're still blaming
Chris
you.
hosts the podcast. It's so much better when Sinone does it. No, I'm not gonna go there. I already started, but
some people in management positions elevate people. Other people knock them down.
Zach, just talk about the freaking 247 and all the prospects there, please.
There were a bunch of guys. It did take me a while to write that article. I did a latest intel on all of the guys that were listed in the top 247 that were Florida State targets or commits. And it was like I had 20 slides of guys plus like 5 more. So there was like 25 guys that I wrote about in total. And a lot of them Florida State had legitimate traction with or a legitimate shot with. Guys that have already set up visits to FSU over the summer, or guys that are in works of scheduling trips. So I would definitely go check out that article to learn the latest on all of those guys.
I think it's just super interesting how, because a year ago, like these lists weren't that long when we would do these type of stories. Like there would be a dozen guys that'd be in it for, and now it's nearly 24. Like they've almost doubled their prospects with these guys.
Or we'd include guys that like they really had a low shot with. But they were
how many of those guys would you say FSU has a 50-50 shot with right now? If you can go off the top of your head,
probably like
or better
15 or so.
Yeah, I mean, I would have guessed like 6 or 7, but still, like we're talking about you potentially adding half dozen to another dozen more top 247 prospects. It's like a reasonable thing to think about. Yeah.
I mean, from the start, I mean, look at like, it's like the 5-star guys like Charles Lester, Jojo Trader.
He had an extra go.
Sorry, I'm like, Jason Zandamela. Like those are guys that are all within the top 100. That's so funny, guys. That are within the top 100.
That tickled me too. I don't know why.
Xavier Mincy, a guy that's considering all 3 in-state schools. Like they're all close to 50-50 shots. And those are all guys that are extremely highly ranked within the top 247.
Dane, coming to you here. Let's talk about the Cam Davis drop. I'm sure Chris is going to have some thoughts on this as well, but Cam Davis has fallen fairly like steadily since he committed to Florida State a couple of years ago. He was a 5-star guy, and part of this is players go up, but like he's actually dropped. Like players get added to the list, but he's actually dropped in his overall grade, and I think that might be what I think I want to focus on here is why. Like it hasn't dropped, or he hasn't played a game this summer to drop anything. Fans kind of want to know why. And I thought you put really good context to kind of explain like what our evaluation system is like. And that's not necessarily us agreeing that he should have a 92 grade. I think we're just trying to explain like some of the pro upside, things like that. So I'll let you take it from here and explain like kind of your viewpoint on it.
Yeah, I made a board post about this, kind of listing and explaining some potential reasonings for this. And I mean, I don't know if any of them in particular were like, especially like what exactly it is. And I don't think it's a huge deal either, to be honest, just personally. But I mean, the biggest thing is probably like, and it's probably the one that people have the biggest problem with, and that's that he could be like maxed out or just closer to that than most other prospects that are considered super high end, like top 150 guys that have these high NFL projections and kind of frames and athletic testing that you can kind of stargaze about and think, wow, that guy could be a first round pick in a few years or something, when Cam Davis might not really have that. And maybe he does, but I think he might have less of it. And like Coach AB, you know, he was on the board too, or he was within that thread saying like, you know, he doesn't quite understand that because it could just be that he's more ready, and that should be seen as a good thing. And I don't really disagree with that either. So I don't know enough about like how the human body grows and stuff and like that sort of thing. That sort of thing with like freaky athletic guys and stuff and as teenagers to say for certain whether that's a good or bad thing necessarily, but I can understand why he might be getting dropped in the ranking some.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what went into it, Dan.
I was really close to just muting him there and helping him.
Thank you. Just do it.
So I think it's odd. He's an outlier. We're an outlier as a company. We have him at what, 116 now? Is that where he landed?
Yeah,
I believe it was. The other three, 35 to 59. All right, so I think he is a top 50 or on the cusp of top 50 prospect in the country. I think he is one of the 3-4 best running backs on film in the country. Obviously, I've not seen him all in person. I've had the luxury of seeing Cam in person. But, you know, we have him as the 7th best back in the country. I just have a tough time believing there's 6 guys in the country at that position better than Cam Davis. I've always used Cam Davis to a degree a lot like Cam Akers, maybe not quite as explosive, maybe not as quite the high ceiling, but like not far off either. And there is some of him that's college ready. Mentally, I think he is college ready. Physically, he's not far off, but he's going to improve as a running back when he gets to college. He's never just focused on being a running back. So, like, I don't think he's a guy that's tapped out at the same time.
So Chris, with the Cam Akers comp, I think this is noteworthy. Cam was a 5-star prospect.
Yeah.
And the way we do things as a network is projecting for NFL and how they're going to do in the NFL.
And running backs become more and more devalued position to a degree.
Well, they're projected to the NFL draft. They're not projected to the NFL.
So this past NFL draft, we had 2 running backs in the top. What was it? 12 picks.
12.
John
Law, but that was an outlier.
8 in the top 1.
That was an outlier.
That is an outlier. But at the same time, I don't think if an NFL team was drafting high schoolers this year, I don't know that they wait till 116 to hit Cam Davis.
Well, let's take it back to the Cam Akers comp, because I do think that is good just in terms of build, playing style, obviously some versatility to their games.
Played a lot of quarterback in high school and both became running backs in college. Yeah.
Cam Akers went in the 50s in the NFL draft?
I don't remember offhand. I believe it was 2nd round.
He did definitely go in the 2nd round. I'm pulling it up real quick. 52nd pick. Damn, I'm really good at this. So he was a 52nd pick, middle of round 2. If we're looking at our rankings, like a top 32 prospect is someone who we would project to go in the 1st round of the NFL draft. So you're talking, if we're going in that kind of order here, you're talking about Cam Davis being like an early day 3 type of guy, round 3, round 4 type maybe. Let's play this game here and actually like go through and do we got an algorithm here. I won't tell how it's worked, but this will give us an idea of how we would grade him. So, Chris, I'm going to start off his projected production in college. Do you think he's going to be an All-American, an All-Conference player, an All-Conference player at the G5 level, which is technically ranked ahead of starters, starter at P5, starter at G5 depth or on the team?
I think he's an all-conference player without a shadow of a doubt who can compete for All-American honors.
Okay. So will he play for a playoff team, a top 10 team, a top 25 team, or a top 40 team?
Top 10 team with playoff aspirations and possibilities.
Timeline, where do you think he can contribute?
I think he can be I think he's a guy that can play
one?
his first year. I think he becomes a primary contributor in year 2 and certainly in year 3 as probably a primary starter.
And then
on a team that divides the running back room a lot, as we all know.
Draft pick, NFL draft production. Do we think he's going to be a top 10 pick, a first round pick, a day 2 pick, or a day 3 pick?
I think he is more likely a day 2 pick than any other one of those columns because of the way the running back room is valued. That's why I kind of fall in around 50. And so, the composite has him at what, 40-ish?
Yeah.
I think he's a tad bit under 30, that. But
Zach, can you pull up the rankings while I'm getting this? Because I want to see where his overall grade, like where that would put him based on we have him. I agree with almost everything you said, Chris. I think he's probably closer to like a early round 4 pick, just because I don't know how he's going to test and stuff like that. But regardless, so I'd have him as a day 3. Regardless, I think we're all pretty much lockstep here. That gives him, based on this algorithm, a score of 94.5, which I think is more accurate than the 92. I think that actually is what I was going to have him off the top of my head. It was probably closer to a 94 grade. If that were the case, Zach, where would that put him in? Where are the guys in 94 ranked nationally?
I thought you were saying to pull up his rankings, but I'll
from
go for now.
I can help Zach real quick with that. From a running back perspective, 94.5 would put him behind Taylor Tatum, who's currently ranked 1, and ahead of Jarrett Gibson, who's currently ranked 2.
So making
they're 95 and 93 respectively in the 247, not the composite, just the 2.
And these are grades that we're talking about.
Correct.
Yes. In the composite, it would put him as a 94.5. He's a 97.62 composite.
Mm-hmm. But the composite's a little weird with how the grades work.
I'm just doing it for the debate, though. 94.5 would actually put him a decent amount down. He'd be between 9 and 10. But again, the composite's calculated differently because you're incorporating 3 other outputs.
I think the takeaway here is we collectively, as people who cover this program and are frankly a little closer to Cam Davis, just geographically, know more about him. We get to see him in person more often, are probably a little bit higher than how our national ranking system has him. I don't think it's egregiously low. I think it's on the low side. And it's fun to argue about rankings in the summertime, but I think closer to a 94 is where I would have him.
I've just never, ever thought of that kid as being outside the top 100. I was surprised when that's where he landed. I've always thought of him being closer to 50 than 100, truthfully.
Chris, I remember you stumping for Asante Samuel, and I think he was outside of the top 50. And you're like, there are not 50 better players nationally. And this kind of reminds me of that.
The knock on Asante was the size, and you know what? He's still small in the NFL, and he's doing pretty damn good there.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you
also miss on him. There's been plenty of guys I've jumped on the table for all the years who ended up whiffing, and there's been guys who I was. Go ahead.
Chris, remember when you said LJ McCray was going to be a dude? When he was ranked a 3-star.
Yeah,
now
he is a dude.
He's a top 80 prospect for us.
Yeah, and if he becomes a guy who finishes more consistently and racks up the numbers in that regard, he's going to wholeheartedly live up to that because physically, his build, his athleticism, a large body like that, there's just not a ton of guys like that. So yeah, he is valuable. Yes.
All day, Dre. You've had some pretty good.
I think Sky Moore, who went to South Carolina, ended up getting injured, didn't produce in the NFL because of that, but was a very good player early in his college career. He was a guy I absolutely loved out of high school. Sadly, injuries derailed him. There was a young man back in, I don't know, maybe 2010 or so from South Florida, went to VTech D-tackle. I was low on him when I worked at Rivals and was doing rankings there. He ended up turning into a pretty damn good player. I think he actually had a cup of coffee in the NFL too. So, there's hits, there's misses. It is what it is with doing that. It's an imperfect science, and you're comparing a kid in Florida to a kid in Texas to a kid in California and everywhere else. And in our case, we have a ton of info on Cam Davis because we have a long-term relationship with him, seen him play ball, seen him in a lot of different settings, also deal with him personally and kind of understand how he's made up versus a kid like Taylor Tatum, who's in, I believe, Texas, who outside of one DM with him when he got offered by FSU, I don't think I've ever really dealt with him. And I've watched his film, but film only tells you so much.
Let's see. Well, we kind of talked about LJ McCray, and that's going to be a decent segue to our road trip, which Zach, Dane, and I partook in the other day. We're going to throw a little bit of information out here, some analysis, but if you've been listening to this point and you don't want it to get goofy, you don't want me to mention the word poop, this would be the time to leave. All right, I'm giving it to you now.
We don't have to do that.
Is that going to, spoiler alert, is there going to be anything poop related in your top 5, Dane?
I have the word fried, but no. Out of context, that sounds horrible.
It does. That does not sound appetizing at all. So Zach's been all over the place this spring, and him and Chris have gone to places.
What does that mean?
Huh?
Nothing.
Anyways, I was trying to say that you're hustling and doing a good job and trying to lift you up and elevate you, but you know what?
Lift them up.
We went to Mandarin High School in the Jacksonville area to interview 2025 quarterback commit Tramel Jones, 2025 wide receiver prospect Jamie French, and 2025 DB prospect Hilton Stubbs, whose brother's a PWO at Florida State. So that was part of the adventure. Then we decided to drive down to Daytona Beach area and check out priority defenders LJ McCray and Xavier Mincy. And then we worked our way back up to St. Augustine to see Mandarin play in the spring jamboree against St. Augustine and Jacksonville Bishop Kenny. So that is going to be kind of the jumping off point as we talk about the road trip. Let's work backwards, I think, in terms of like our evaluation or what we saw or what stood out to us, guys. And that's we got to see Tramel Jones play in person. And I'll throw this to you, Dane. I think we all walked away pretty impressed with what we saw. Fair?
Definitely, yeah, fair. Like, it's really impressive how there was like so few weaknesses from what we saw. Like, for such a young prospect, he seemed just really polished and definitely doesn't lack physical ability. Like, no part of that was in talking to him and before the game and everything. Like, yeah, that dude, we definitely came away impressed.
Zach, you were shaking your head, so I thought you were going to start talking.
No,
He's disagreeing with me.
He's being
like,
a good hype man. He threw two touchdown passes, 1 interception, and what was basically half a play, but the interception wasn't his fault. It was it
bounced off the numbers of his tight end.
Yeah,
right?
a receiver or whatever. If it was a spear, the target would have been dead. And it wasn't his fault. He threw it right there in the numbers and just ricocheted up. But no, Tramel Jones, the 2025 quarterback commit, Dane said, like, there weren't many weaknesses. I thought that was a good starting point in evaluating him, is he did everything pretty well. He talked to us before the game about wanting to get a little bit better as a mover in the pocket, and people don't think he is super athletic. You got to see him move around in the pocket. You got to see him scramble once or twice. The touch on his passes I thought was extremely impressive. He had 2 touchdown passes to Jamie French, who we'll get into that in a second, but he's a stud. And just his demeanor I thought was really impressive. The way he carried himself before the game had kind of like a little edge to him. He was actually probably a little like overhyped, a little juiced early on. He missed some throws that first drive and then really settled in, operated the offense with granted a lot of good weapons around him, but he operated at a really high level and looked super in control. The 2 touchdown passes were just him finding Jamie French one-on-one, getting them the ball in a good place, letting them go make a play. I think FSU did a nice job on this evaluation. I think he's someone who's going to only continue to get better. I don't know. People on the board have asked, is he going to be the next Luke Kromenhoek? I don't think that Tramel has the same tools that Luke has, so that's probably going to put up his upside or put a cap on his upside. But I think FSU's done a nice job there. I mean, Georgia was sniffing around with Mike Bobo was there, and I think part of that was to get some eval on Tramel. So, Chris, I'm going to throw this to you. You have any thoughts on evaluation process here with Tramel?
Wanted to ask the reaction to the interception. How did he handle it?
You know what? So I think he was fine with the interception. There was a turnover later in the game too, where he got the ball out to a wide receiver in space. He had a first down. They were driving. The wide receiver just fumbled the football. They lost it. And initially, his first reaction, for people watching, you'll see it, but listening, I'll try to paint the picture. Initially, Tramel kind of put his head back, kind of like in oh man, kind of frustrated. Gathered himself, thought about it, went over far away to the wide receiver across the field, put his hand on the back of his helmet, gave him like a slap on the helmet, like a reassuring one, attaboy, it's okay, you get it next time, and walked with him to the sideline the entire way. And so that for a guy who is an underclassman, he's technically a sophomore in high school still, that that I thought was a really nice sign for him. In addition, like even Chris, when he threw touchdown passes, he was the first guy to go over and celebrate with his wide receiver. Like the body language was excellent. I think we spoke to him. Like he is very mature, very thoughtful. He's a guy that you want to be at quarterback. Is how I would describe it.
Yeah, and I think they were from when FSU landed his commitment. I recall some of the conversations we had leading up to that, basically of, we like him because we think he is mature. Also, if we end up pursuing 2 in that class, we think he's a kid that we can have those conversations where you can be comfortable with. I think it translates on the field, and that's just positive hearing you guys say that. That was the thing when I read your analysis piece, which I thought was very good, concise, and to the point. I thought that was the thing that stood out to me, was like it was abundantly clear that he acts like a mature kid. And we got to remember he's only, 15 or 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a kid that's being handed the keys to a good offense that he operated last year, but he understands he has to take that next step. And I think it's just positive signs. I've been around enough high school quarterback prospects to know if they act immature at that age, yes, they can grow out of it, but usually it's a negative sign. When they act like they're older than they are, it's usually a very, very good sign.
And he might be to the point where like they don't feel like they have to go for a second quarterback in that class. Like that is very much so on the table. When he got the commitment, that was something we talked about. They've talked about it with him. Like they will have quarterbacks on campus, but there's not someone that they are like aggressively pursuing to add right now. They've been pretty transparent with him. They're gonna be comfortable with Trammell also going and taking taking visits this summer because he is so early in the process. But like there's a level of comfort in that dynamic and that relationship that I think is important, because you want to have that level of trust between a quarterback and a head coach, quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, and everyone seems in lockstep there at this point early in the recruitment. Zach, I'm going to throw this to you. We got to talk to Jamie French a little bit. He was obviously really good in the game. You said afterwards you think he might be the best wide receiver in the state.
Well, for his class.
Well, yeah, that was you were, dude. I will.
Right. Yeah, that was really a good point there, Brendan. But Jamie French is the best receiver I've seen this spring. And he's probably the second best receiver in state, regardless of class, behind Jeremiah Smith, who FSU's targeting and is committed to Ohio State. But Jamie French is superbly talented. His release off the line is one of the best I've seen in the last few years, and just super electric. His route running's pretty pristine for a guy that's, entering his junior year of high school. And I think regarding interest in Florida State, I don't know how much FSU had momentum with him before the 10-3 season and before Trammell Jones committed to FSU. For the next 2 years or so, he's going to have Trammell Jones throwing him the football while being hopefully committed to Florida State. And he's going to they're going to build that connection. And he told me in an interview before the game that he's already been a guy or Trammell's already had him increase his level of interest in Florida State. And he's set up a visit to FSU for early June. I'll have a story on Jamie French today. But the only 3 visits he has scheduled in June so far are Alabama, Ohio State, and FSU. So I think that's a pretty good sign for FSU's early chances with one of the best receivers in the country for the next year's class.
So, Zach, as an avid Florida Panthers fan, does Jamie French look like he's skating down the ice when he's running?
I am that's the first team I ever had season tickets to. Yeah.
Wow, he's 22 years old and already has season tickets to professional sports teams.
No, this is when I was younger.
I don't know that Zach's actually 22. I think he may have lied to us about his age all this time.
I'm also 23, guys. Thank you.
See, been lying all this time.
Chris remembered it was my birthday, then just didn't send me a text.
I don't want to raise expectations too high.
we shared that I went on a road trip with Chris, and he knew it was my birthday the entire car ride and didn't say anything the entire day until like a podcast next week.
Again, don't want to raise expectations.
What is Caressa's favorite cake flavor? Chris?
Strawberry.
Right,
I will never forget that again. But no, when Jamie French is running down the field, does he look like he's skating on ice? I mean, is that a good way of describing kind of how silky smooth, the acceleration, the in and out of cuts, just everything he does?
That is definitely like how I would describe him as a football player. Like he's just so smooth. Both of his touchdowns look super easy. Like it didn't really look like he was showing that much effort, but that's just because of how superbly talented he is as a football player. Like, he just gets down the field in a hurry, is able to go up and get the ball. He kind of did that on both occasions. The other one, the one he like kind of just took the ball. It was like positioned right over where the DB's head was, and he just took it and caressed it into the end zone.
Legend Dwight Thomas. If you're in the recruiting industry, you know who Dwight is.
I love Dwight.
Yeah, everyone who knows Dwight loves Dwight because he was Emmett Smith's high school coach, and he now does scouting. And I walked by him after that touchdown catch that Zach referred to as caressing the ball over someone's head kid show.
Yeah.
And Dwight Thomas goes to his assistant, and yeah, I don't think that was the right word, Zach. He goes to his assistant. He's like, in your notes. I gotta get my Dwight voice. In your notes, write down that it's like taking candy from a baby. And I was like, it was so pure and just perfectly
Caressed.
Yeah, he didn't say, now write down that he caressed the ball over the receiver, over the cornerback's head. Yeah, that's the difference between a legend and Zach. Dane, do you want to talk about your interview and just viewpoint of watching Hilton Stubbs in Wednesday's game? I almost said Saturdays. It's Friday today. We were there Wednesday. Time is a vortex.
Yeah, he's another 2025 guy that is really impressive too. I think he's rated as a top 100 guy. He's playing safety for Mandarin. It's probably where he projects at the next level too. But he's just a guy with a really big frame, especially for his age, and he's probably going to fill into it really well. I mean, he's already a guy that has some muscle on him, but just being younger, he's still pretty skinny still, especially in his upper body.
What did he say about the just in your interview with him? What kind of stood out?
Yeah, he mentioned that distance from home is a big deal to him, and mentioned Florida and Florida State, probably Tennessee in there too, is like maybe the schools that are standing out most to him at the moment. He does have a brother at Florida State that he admitted will play a factor in his recruitment probably. Like he admitted that it's an advantage for Florida State, at least at this point, to have his older brother. He's a walk-on defensive back at Florida State, a pretty good one too. But yeah, those are probably the two biggest takeaways. We could see him visit in June as well.
He's supposed to come on the 9th of June, I believe.
Yeah, and FSU is very high on him. I think it's fair to say they like him.
Yeah,
so
I think he's
Mandarin has two other defensive backs that are both committed to Penn State: John Mitchell and Antoine Belgrave Shorter, I think his name is. I think FSU likes Hilton Stubbs more than any of the defenders on Mandarin's defense.
And Bellevue, the hyphen had he had 2 interceptions, one for a touchdown. Yeah,
the hyphen.
Belgrave Shorter had 2 interceptions and some nice plays during the spring game.
Mitchell and Belgrave Shorter both visited FSU back in, I believe it was January for Junior Day. So there had been involvement there, but
yeah,
I think FSU's defensive backboard, which we talked on the last podcast, will be one that June will help us sort out a great deal. I think John Mitchell is like a tier below.
All right, so then we drove to Daytona Beach, about an hour south, to check out priority defenders LJ McCray and Xavier Mincy. LJ McCray, Dane pointed out, like when once you saw him, like you're like, oh, that's him, because he just kind of towers over everyone else. So
6'6", 240 pounds,
like legit too. And then Xavier Mincy also looked great. Was working at cornerback. Abundantly clear, he is a cornerback in high school. We have him listed as a safety at 24/7 Sports, but FSU is recruiting him as a cornerback, and it seems like most schools probably are, other than like say Alabama or so. I'm not sure if anything revelatory came from those interviews, guys. It was good to go down there and see them and chat with them for a little bit. We did have some like fighter jets going off overhead as we were trying to do the interviews, which made it a little tricky. But yeah, it was good to go see those guys. I don't know if we have anything that you want to add there on just talking to them, but it sounds like FSU's in a good spot for both, but still some murkiness, I guess, with the recruitments.
Yeah, I'll start with LJ McCray. I think it's a 3-way battle right now: Florida State, Florida, and Georgia. Georgia's the most recent offer for him out of that group. They offered this spring. I think they're a team that's kind of turned it up with him over the last few months. FSU's been involved the longest of those 3. They offered, I believe, last summer. They got him in for the Seminole Showcase camp, and he absolutely shined in that setting against some pretty good competition. And yeah, I think FSU sits solidly in that top group, and I think Tallahassee will be a visit destination for him this summer, an official visit destination, I should say. The only known visit that he shared publicly, or I shouldn't say he shared publicly, but that got out, is that he's visiting UF the first weekend of June. And I believe Florida State has a visit date set with him. He's not willing to share stuff publicly. Trust me, I tried. But yeah, I guess we'll see what he announces the date. But I think FSU will get him in for an official during June.
And with Xavier Mincy, he's another guy who looks really good in person. But I think Ian State schools are probably the ones that are in the best position with him. And then outside of the big three, there's probably Alabama. And I think those are probably the four most likely destinations for him. I think he did mention that Miami, Florida State are probably going to get official visits in June. And then, but he doesn't have set dates for those right now, according to him. He said he's not sure, he's like flip-flopping them around, but I think we can expect that he'll take an official visit to Florida State. At this point, Florida, I feel like I think if Florida goes and has like a good season, then Xavier Mincy probably ends up at Florida.
Well, nothing to worry about there, Dane.
But if not, then FSU might be in the best position there. And he's really good. He's a huge priority.
I don't view those two as a package deal, but they are good friends.
They are, yeah. Well. I think they want to take visits together. So they might end up at the same school, but I don't think it's something that they're selling as a package deal.
And I asked Mincy about that, and a lot of times guys will say they are, and they almost never are, but he didn't even say they were. He was saying like, that'd be nice. Yeah, but that's not what we're trying to do.
Okay, let's get into Dane's top 5 from the road trip. Top 5 favorite moments.
Just mine.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll comment on them and critique them, but let's get into it. Number 5.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, I just jotted a few down last night when you asked me if I would be ready for this. So I just have a short list. I have 5.
Is it 5? Okay. Well, you followed the instructions well so far.
The first one, it's just one word. It says fried, but I don't know if we can get into that, and I don't think we need to.
Zach, I'll defer to you're more mature than I am. Do you think that's appropriate?
Yeah, go for it, Dane.
No, don't let Dane describe it.
I don't know. I think we should just let that be.
All right, we'll just let that go. Fried.
Yeah. So fried. That was a good time. That's a good laugh. Zach getting scared in the rain is something I put down.
Okay.
It happened again?
No, it didn't.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I think Brandon and I were being maybe a little arguably cruel, maybe at times. And it was raining a lot, and Zach gets a little antsy behind the wheel when it starts raining.
Gets panicky when it starts raining.
All right, it's really hard to see.
Okay. This all right, for context here. I like that they're inside jokes, but we need to provide a little bit more context, I think, too, for people to enjoy this segment. On a previous trip with Chris, Zach, and I down to South Florida on our way back up, it started pouring torrentially, and Zach screams out, "I can't see," while looking at me, and then looks behind him into the back seat, and then yells it to Chris. Chris, a veteran of many road trips, he's seen plenty of stuff on the road, just kind of shrugs his shoulders.
If today's the day, then it's a day.
But for Zach to not see and to think the most appropriate thing to do is to take his eyes off the road and scream at us.
I was looking for help.
When you are a driver, you want to give comfort to the people around you in the car, the passengers. And so Zach also did the exact opposite of that. And so anyways, it started raining again on this trip. We didn't have a screen I can't see moment, but definitely 2 hands on the wheels. And Dane
Who wouldn't do that though?
Also, I think the hazard lights, we had this conversation, should be like okay to put on when it rains.
And I very much disagree with that, and I don't even want to get into it. Holy crap.
Okay, we'll move on. Number 3, Dane.
Actually, we should have like a poll or something on this, apparently.
Okay. Yeah.
Hazard lights okay or not when it's like a torrential downpour on the highway?
Dane's point is that you could think something catastrophically is wrong with someone. I would point when it starts when it starts raining heavily and someone puts on their hazards, so you can see them better. And I understand that's what's happening.
And
so,
headlights work well too.
not if you're behind someone, Dane. Continue. Number 3.
3. Colombian food was really good. That was the best food we had for sure. But I also mentioned that the waitress had a perpetual whistle. That was kind of freaking me out, is what I said. But yeah, the food was really good. I had tilapia.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was good. That was a good lunch. I think it was better than getting fried chicken like at 9:00 at night from Wawa's.
Hey, but we got recognized by my boy Brian at Wawa.
Shout out
yeah,
Brian.
that was cool.
All right, number 2.
Seeing Trammell, Jamie, and Stubbs in person. That was cool. I mean, that's just good. I don't know. It's not like a fun moment, but that was fun. Yeah. I mean, seeing them and being able to kind of evaluate in person, that's a big reason we're doing all this, taking value from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was good. It was informative. I enjoyed getting out there to see prospects in person. It's been a little while, so
Yeah.
it was nice.
I think all 3 of them were pretty impressive too. I mean, especially Trammell, Troy, and Jamie. They're both like, yeah, that was great. And then the last thing.
Yep. And let's get fanfare for number 1.
It's not funny. I can't believe you only made me do this. I said meeting and having conversations with some like different college coaches and stuff.
Oh yeah, you get out there and you network a little bit. So the Steak and Shake debacle of 2023, the Great Steak and Shake disaster didn't make the list.
Dude,
God, I was afraid. I just knew how it would turn out, and I knew people would hate it. And having fried on there was bad enough. I'm not going into it.
I want to explain this. Brendan was giving me so much crap for trying to find, we're trying to find a good bathroom for her to go in, and we went to this one gas station that was like, it was an outhouse, and he's like, I'm not going in there. And then we go to the Steak and Shake. I'm like, it's a Steak and Shake. It will be chill. I go in the restroom. Mine's perfectly fine. And then I hear Brendan and Dane dying laughing outside the stall. I'm like, what is going on? And I look, I come out of the bathroom after I'm done, and I look into the other stall, and it's the worst scene you could ever see.
The flooding from it was probably like 10 feet in circumference, and you could see into the toilet why it was flooded. And I don't know why I think it was because there was such a buildup to me giving Zach crap. Like, I thought going to Steak and Shake. Like, Chris, have you ever stopped at a Steak and Shake as a bathroom stop in all your road trips, right? No. McDonald's, a nice gas station. There were so many other options, and Zach was insistent on stopping in the Steak and Shake.
It was easy. It was right there, like when we were trying to figure out where we were going to go.
The secret to that is like a supermarket.
Oh, I love it. Just go to Publix and you get to recharge. It's going to be cleaner. Yeah, yep. Publix is the way to do it. The Steak and Shake debacle, the disastrous explosion in that toilet stall. Zach was laughing so much that his stream was like getting impacted.
Oh, see, that's
okay. End the podcast.
All right. If you've listened this far, I gave you fair warning that we were going to talk about some potty stuff. 5-star reviews on Apple. A podcast on Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast, it helps us out. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe. That helps out as well. I want to thank Chris. I want to thank Dane. I want to thank Zach. I want to thank Chattanooga Whiskey. I want to thank the Turner Group for listening. We appreciate everyone who's made it this far. Thank you. We'll talk to you guys later. This has been On the Bench.